I want to show you something. It's a photograph on my phone. If you were to just glance at it, you'd probably smile. You'd think it was an ad for a luxury vacation or a perfume. A perfect couple on a perfect beach, bathed in the golden light of a setting sun. The woman is laughing, head thrown back, a genuine, carefree laugh. She's wrapped in the arms of a man who is looking down at her with an expression of pure adoration. They are the picture of happiness, of success, of love. That woman is me, Chloe, or she was me. And the man holding me, the one who looks like he could single-handedly fight off a storm to keep me safe. That's my husband, Mark. Our life, on paper, was an impeccable work of art. I know how that sounds. Painfully cliché. But every cliché has a kernel of truth, and ours was a massive, glittering diamond of it. I'm 28 years old, 5'3", with the kind of blonde hair and blue eyes that people write songs about. I've never been naive about the attention my appearance brings. It opens doors. But I was determined to be more than just a pretty face. I fought for my master's in marketing. I clawed my way up the ladder at a competitive firm in Chicago, and I was damn good at my job. I had my own life, my own ambitions. I was whole on my own. Meeting Mark felt like finding a missing part of my soul I never even knew was gone. He was 35, a towering 6'5", with this incredible stillness about him, a confidence that wasn't loud or arrogant, but deep and unshakable. He was a senior executive at a top-tier tech firm, the kind of man who commanded respect without ever having to raise his voice. He was the complete package, and he chose me. Our meeting story was one of those anecdotes we'd tell at dinner parties, the one that made other couples sigh. It was a charity gala for a children's hospital. My company had a table, and Mark was a keynote speaker. I remember watching him on that stage, under the bright lights, speaking so passionately and intelligently about innovation and social responsibility. He wasn't just reading a speech. He was captivating a room of jaded, wealthy people, making them care. I found myself leaning forward, hanging on his every word, and thinking, that man is a force of nature. Later, during the cocktail hour, I was lingering by the silent auction tables, wistfully looking at a travel package for a 2-week trip to Bali. I felt a presence beside me and turned. It was him. He wasn't looking at me, but at the brochure in my hand. He smiled, a slow, easy smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. I've been, he said, his voice a low baritone that was even more compelling up close. You'd love it. The sunsets look like the sky is on fire. There was no cheesy pickup line, no overt flirtation, just a simple, shared observation. We talked for what felt like 5 minutes, but turned out to be 2 hours. We talked about everything and nothing. Travel, books, our ridiculous childhood fears, our biggest dreams. It was effortless. By the time he walked me to my car and asked for my number, I knew, with a certainty that was both thrilling and terrifying, that my life had just irrevocably changed. Our courtship was a blur of perfect moments. He pursued me with a gentle, unwavering determination. There were candlelit dinners at Alinea, spontaneous weekend trips to Napa Valley where we'd get lost in vineyards, and a trip to New York where he surprised me with front-row seats to a Broadway show I'd mentioned wanting to see months earlier. He was a master of the grand gesture, but it was the small things that truly captured my heart. He remembered the name of my pet hamster from the 3rd grade. He noticed when I changed my nail polish. He'd leave a thermos of my favorite coffee on my car's passenger seat on mornings when he knew I had a big presentation. He made me feel not just loved, but listened to. He made me feel seen. A year later, we were married in a sun-drenched vineyard in Sonoma, surrounded by our closest friends and family. I remember the scent of lavender and old wine barrels in the air. I remember the feel of the delicate lace on my dress. Most of all, I remember standing opposite him, under an arch of white roses, and reading the vows I had spent weeks writing. My voice shook as I promised to be his partner, his confidant, his home, through all of life's storms. He looked at me, his own blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears, and he promised to honor, cherish, and protect me. Always. That word, always, felt like the most solid thing in the universe. It was the foundation upon which we were building our forever. We settled into a beautiful colonial house in a leafy Chicago suburb. It had a wraparound porch and a huge backyard where we were planning to get a golden retriever we'd name Gus. We were the couple our friends looked to as the ideal. We hosted Thanksgiving. Our 4th of July barbecues were legendary, and we always seemed to operate in perfect sync, finishing each other's sentences, sharing inside jokes with a simple glance across a crowded room. Our relationship was a fortress. At least, that's what I believed. It's astonishing, really, how you can be the star of a show and have no idea the set is made of cardboard. You can deliver your lines with perfect conviction, believing in the reality of the world that's been built around you, never realizing that you're the only one who doesn't know the plot's dark, secret twist. My world was built on what I thought was unshakable trust. Mark's career was his passion, and I was his biggest cheerleader. The long hours, the frequent business trips, I saw them as necessary sacrifices on the altar of his ambition. His boss, Cynthia Miller, was a name I heard almost daily. She was a titan in the tech world, a ruthless, brilliant woman who had shattered every glass ceiling she encountered. Mark spoke of her with a complicated mix of professional reverence and personal frustration. "She's a genius, Chloe, but she's a shark," he'd often say over dinner. "She expects nothing less than perfection, and she will chew you up and spit you out if you don't deliver." I built an image of her in my mind, this formidable, intimidating powerhouse in a designer suit. I respected her from afar. I never met her, but her name was a constant, invisible guest in our home, a third party in our marriage that I had accepted as part of the package. Her demands dictated our schedules, her moods affected his, and I never once thought to question it. Last month, I had a 4-day marketing summit in San Francisco. It was a huge opportunity for me. I was leading a panel on digital engagement, a culmination of a year's worth of hard work. Mark was incredibly supportive, or so it seemed. He helped me pack, quizzed me on my talking points, and drove me to O'Hare at the crack of dawn. He kissed me long and deep at the terminal gate. "Knock 'em dead, superstar," he whispered against my lips. "I'm so proud of you." The next morning, a massive bouquet of my favorite flowers, stargazer lilies, arrived at my hotel room. The card was simple, written in his familiar, strong script, counting down the seconds until you're home. "All my love, M." The conference was a massive success. My panel was a hit, I made some incredible contacts, and I felt a surge of professional pride and accomplishment. On the 3rd day, a Wednesday, I wrapped up all my obligations by early afternoon. I was sitting in my hotel room, looking out at the fog rolling over the bay, and a profound wave of homesickness washed over me. It was more than just missing him. I missed our life. I missed the worn-in spot on our sofa, the smell of coffee brewing in the morning, the simple, comforting weight of his arm around me as we fell asleep. That's when the idea sparked. A sweet, spontaneous, romantic idea. I would fly home a day early. I would surprise him. My mind raced, painting a perfect little scene. I'd slip into the house quietly. He'd probably be on the couch, watching some game, a beer in his hand. I'd sneak up behind him, cover his eyes with my hands, and he'd jump, then laugh when he realized it was me. He'd be so happy, so genuinely touched by the gesture. It would become another one of our stories, a testament to our wonderful, spontaneous love. The time I flew halfway across the country, just to get one extra night with him. Vibrating with excitement, I booked a red-eye flight that would get me into Chicago in the evening. I didn't text him. I didn't call. The surprise was the whole point. The entire flight, I couldn't stop smiling. I felt like a teenager with a crush, giddy with anticipation. The Uber ride from O'Hare was a familiar journey. The dazzling lights of the city skyline slowly gave way to the quiet, dark streets of our suburb. Each turn brought me closer, and my heart beat faster. When the car pulled into our driveway, I saw his BMW parked in the garage. A wave of relief. He was home. The house was all lit up, a warm, golden glow spilling from every window. It looked like a postcard for domestic bliss, a perfect little snow globe of a life, safe and sound. I thanked the driver, grabbed my carry-on, and walked up the familiar stone path to our front door. I remember the crisp night air on my cheeks, the scent of the late-blooming roses from our garden, and the ridiculously happy smile I couldn't wipe off my face. I was home, my safe harbor, my sanctuary. I fished my keys out of my purse, my fingers slightly clumsy with excitement. I found the right one, slid it into the lock, and turned it as silently as a cat burglar. The heavy oak door swung inward with a barely audible click, and in that single silent moment, my entire world was brought to its knees. The snow globe didn't just shatter, it exploded. The first thing that hit me wasn't a sight, but a sound. Music. Not just music, but a deafening, pulsing beat. It was electronic, aggressive, the kind of industrial techno you'd hear in a dark, grimy warehouse party in Berlin, not a colonial home in the Chicago suburbs. It was coming from upstairs, and it was so loud that I could feel the bass vibrating through the hardwood floor, up through the soles of my feet. It felt like the house had developed a sick, frantic heartbeat. A cold, sharp confusion sliced through my giddy excitement. This was so deeply, fundamentally wrong. Mark hated this kind of music. He called it anxiety-inducing noise. He was a man of quiet evenings, of low-volume jazz and classic rock. My hand was still on the doorknob, and my first instinct was to call out his name, to announce myself, and demand an explanation for the racket. But I didn't. Some primal, reptilian part of my brain took over, silencing me. It was a gut feeling, a cold dread that slithered up my spine, whispering a warning. It's the feeling a deer gets just before the wolf strikes. I slipped off my heels, leaving them like abandoned ships by the door. I placed my suitcase gently on the floor. My breath caught in my throat. Barefoot, I began to climb the carpeted stairs, each step a deliberate, silent act. The music grew louder, more oppressive, the beat pounding in my ears, in my chest, in my skull. It felt like I was wading into a thick, polluted sea of sound. Our bedroom door was ajar, a sliver of light cutting through the darkness of the upstairs hallway. The monstrous sound was pouring from that crack. My heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs, a desperate, terrified rhythm trying to break free. I don't know what I expected to see. Maybe a party. Maybe him with his friends, having a bizarre, out-of-character guy's night. My mind couldn't conjure a reality that would make sense of the scene. With a hand that trembled, I pushed the door open, and I saw it, and the universe broke. It wasn't that time slowed down. It stopped. It ceased to exist. My consciousness fractured into a million glittering shards of pure, unadulterated horror. The floor beneath my feet wasn't there anymore. The air in the room was a thick, unbreathable poison. I was trapped in the doorway, a ghost in my own life, forced to witness the desecration of my own soul. My husband, Mark, was on our bed. Our bed. The beautiful four-poster bed we had spent a whole weekend picking out. The bed where we had slept and dreamed and made love and whispered our deepest secrets in the dark. He was not alone. He was behind a woman, his body moving with a frantic, brutal rhythm that was perfectly in time with the horrible, pounding music. His hands were clamped on her hips, his face a mask of strained, selfish pleasure. And the woman, her head was thrown back, her messy, graying bob of hair plastered with sweat to the back of her neck. She turned her head slightly, just enough to moan something in his ear, and in that moment, I saw her profile. It was Cynthia, Cynthia Miller, his boss, a woman nearly twice his age, a woman I knew only as a disembodied name, a corporate titan, a distant figure of power. And here she was, naked and grunting and writhing in my bed, in my home, with my husband buried deep inside her. My mind simply could not compute the data. It was a system overload. I was trying to reconcile the image of the man who had sent me flowers yesterday with the grunting animal I was watching now, and the conflict was so severe it felt like my brain was physically tearing in two. The two realities could not, would not, coexist. It was a violation of the laws of my own personal physics. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stood there, my body turning to stone. I don't know for how long. It was an eternity trapped in a single looping second of hell. What finally broke the spell was a sound, a tiny, pathetic, almost imperceptible noise, a hitch of breath, a gasp. It came from me. At the sound, Mark's head snapped up. His eyes, glazed with lust, locked with mine across the room. And in that one horrifying second, I saw a lightning-fast progression of emotions flash across his face. First, pure, unadulterated shock. Then, abject, childlike terror. And then, something so much worse, something so soul-crushingly insulting that it would haunt me forever. Annoyance. He looked annoyed, like I was an inconvenient interruption, like I had ruined his fun. Cynthia twisted her body around, her movements slow and languid. When she saw me standing there, her face was a mask of cold, dismissive indifference. There was no shame, no panic. She simply stared at me with dead eyes, then slowly, deliberately, reached for the corner of our duvet to cover her nakedness, as if she were bored by the whole affair. The music was still pounding, but in the room, a new silence fell. A silence that was heavier and more suffocating than any sound. Mark scrambled off her, fumbling for his discarded pants, his face a blotchy, pale canvas of panic. "Chloe," he stammered, his voice hoarse. "Chloe, this isn't what it looks like." That sentence, that idiotic, insulting, impossible, cliché sentence, the last refuge of the guilty scoundrel. What did he think it looked like? A vigorous corporate team-building exercise? A new form of yoga? The words were still trapped in my throat, strangled by a grief so profound, it was a physical weight on my chest. I couldn't have spoken if I'd wanted to. Without a word, I turned around. On legs that felt like they were made of brittle glass, I walked back down the stairs. I saw my abandoned heels by the door, picked them up, and walked out into the cold night air. I didn't get my suitcase. I didn't slam the door. I just left the house, the life, the man. I just walked away. I walked down the middle of our quiet suburban street, my bare feet numb against the cold pavement. Streetlights cast long, distorted shadows. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just walked. I heard the front door of my house, of that house, open behind me. I heard Mark shouting my name, his voice laced with a panic that sounded utterly fake. "Chloe, wait, please, Chloe, let me explain." I didn't slow down. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, until his desperate cries faded into the chirping of the crickets and the vast, indifferent silence of the night. I ended up at my sister Mia's apartment in the city. I have no clear memory of getting there. I think I called an Uber on autopilot. I showed up at her door sometime after 10 p.m., a shell of a woman in a wrinkled business suit, my face a blank, tearless mask. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and her own expression crumbled from confusion to deep, knowing sorrow. She didn't ask a single question. She just pulled me inside, wrapped her arms around me, and led me to her couch. It was there, in the safety of her embrace, that the dam finally broke. I collapsed. I sobbed. It wasn't a quiet, dignified cry. It was a raw, guttural, soul-tearing wail, the sound of a life being ripped apart at the seams. I cried for hours, for the man I thought I'd married, for the future I thought we had, for the naive, trusting woman I used to be. Of course, the aftermath was a predictable storm. Mark blew up my phone. It was a relentless assault. Hundreds of texts, dozens of missed calls, a constant barrage of pathetic, desperate digital pleas. I am so sorry. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Please, Chloe, we can fix this. I know we can. Fix this? How do you fix a memory that has been permanently seared onto the inside of your eyelids? How do you scrub the image of your husband and his boss from the sacred space of your own bed? You can't. It's a stain that never washes out. We've been separated since that night. He's staying at his sister's place across town. I told him through a single curt text that I needed space, and for the first few days, a fragile quiet settled. But then, the begging began in earnest. He sent a long, rambling email, a multi-page manifesto of regret and self-flagellation. He swore it was a one-time thing. He painted himself as a victim, claiming Cynthia had been pressuring him for months, that their work dynamic was toxic and had spilled over into something ugly and regrettable. He said he was drunk. He said he was stressed from a big project. He threw every pathetic excuse at the wall, hoping one would stick. And then came the grand gesture, the ace up his sleeve. I resigned this morning, he wrote. I walked away from all of it. The title, the salary, the stock options, it's all gone, because none of it means anything without you. You are my entire life, Chloe. Please don't let one stupid, horrible, meaningless mistake bring an end to us. I have to admit, that part landed a blow. He quit his job. The job that was his identity. The career that he had poured his heart and soul into. It was a dramatic, sweeping sacrifice, expertly calculated to prove the depth of his remorse, the sincerity of his love. And here is the sickest, most twisted part of this entire nightmare. It almost worked. Because I still loved him. I mean, have you ever felt that? That impossible, schizophrenic, gut-wrenching pull in two opposite directions? To love someone with every fiber of your being, to have your history and your future completely entangled with theirs, but to be so utterly shattered and betrayed by them that you can barely draw a breath. Part of me, the weak, hopeful, sentimental part, wanted to believe him. The part of me that missed the familiar weight of his arm around me at night. The part of me that remembered the way he'd cried at our wedding. I wanted that man back. I was desperate for the lie to be true. But the other part of me, the new part that was born in that bedroom doorway, she couldn't forget. She couldn't forgive. She was the one drowning in an ocean of betrayal, and every pleading text from him was another saltwater wave crashing over her head, pushing her deeper into the dark. I spent an entire week in a gray, featureless fog. I took a leave of absence from work. I barely ate. I just sat on Mia's couch, wrapped in a blanket, endlessly scrolling through old pictures of us on my phone, a special kind of self-torture. The happy couple in Sonoma, the smiling couple in Paris, the laughing couple on our front porch. It was all a lie. Every single memory was now corrupted, poisoned by the knowledge of his deception. Who was this man I had married? Was any of it ever real? Mia was my anchor in the storm. She didn't offer platitudes or advice. She just sat with me. She made me endless cups of tea. She put toast in my hands and made sure I ate it. And she listened without judgment as I cycled through the same agonizing questions over and over and over again. It was on a rainy Tuesday, exactly 1 week after my world had imploded, that something shifted. I had finally worked up the courage to go back to the house to pack a bag of my things and get some of his stuff out of my sight. The house was cold and silent. Every object seemed to mock me. His running shoes by the door, his favorite coffee mug sitting by the sink, his scent still lingering on the pillows. Each item was a tiny, sharp paper cut on my already bleeding heart. I was in our bedroom, numbly cleaning out his nightstand drawer, just throwing his meaningless junk into a cardboard box. Old paperbacks, a watch with a broken strap, a tangle of charging cables. As I pulled out the drawer liner to wipe it clean, my fingers brushed against something flat and smooth tucked underneath. A phone. Not his phone. Not the brand new iPhone 15 Pro that was practically surgically attached to his hand. This was an older model, a cheap Android, a burner phone. My blood ran cold. My breath hitched. I don't know what compelled me to do it. Maybe I was just searching for a final definitive reason to hate him, something to kill that last, flickering, stupid ember of hope that I was clinging to. My hands shaking, I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. There was no passcode. And there it was, not just a secret, but a whole secret life, laid bare in glowing pixels. Texts, between him and Cynthia, dating back over a year. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't a recent transgression. It was a long, calculated, sordid affair. They talked about everything. Their secret lunches that were billed to the company. Their business trips that were nothing more than romantic getaways. And they talked about me. They made fun of me. I saw my own name in their ugly, secret world. "Chloe is so adorably naive," one of Cynthia's texts read. "She actually thinks you work until 10 p.m. on Fridays." Mark's reply, a message that will be forever etched into my memory, was, "It's what keeps the peace. She's happy living in her little bubble. Let's not be the ones to burst it." My bubble. My perfect little life was a joke to them. I was a convenience, a silly, oblivious wife who made his public life look good while he was living a double life behind my back. But it got so much worse. It wasn't just about the sex, about the affair. It was a full-blown conspiracy. They were planning to leave the company together. And they weren't planning on leaving empty-handed. I found notes, spreadsheets, and more texts detailing a plan to funnel proprietary data, sensitive client lists, and valuable trade secrets to a new, competing startup they were planning to launch. They were going to gut the firm from the inside out, taking the biggest clients and the most valuable intellectual property with them. His resignation. It wasn't a grand gesture of love for me. It was step one of their exit strategy. He was just getting ahead of the implosion he knew they were about to cause. He was lying. He was lying about the affair. He was lying about his job. He was lying about his love. He was lying about everything. I sat there on the floor of our bedroom, the cold, hard plastic of the burner phone in my hand, and the immense sadness inside me, the grief that had been drowning me for a week. It began to change. It started to curdle, then harden, then heat up. It slowly, glacially, transmuted into something else entirely, something white-hot and razor-sharp and laser-focused. Rage. A pure, cleansing, unadulterated rage that burned away the tears and the heartbreak and the weakness. They didn't just break my heart. They insulted my intelligence. They belittled me. They thought I was a stupid, pretty, naive little thing living in a bubble, a doll in a dollhouse, an obstacle to be managed. He had begged me to take him back. He said he was broken without me. He said he loved me. He lied. He lied. He lied. And in that moment, sitting on the floor surrounded by the wreckage of my shattered marriage, I made a new vow, a different kind of vow from the one I made in Sonoma. He wanted me to fix this. Oh, I was going to fix it all right. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to get even. Have you ever been pushed so far past your breaking point that you become someone you don't even recognize? Someone stronger, colder, and far, far more dangerous? If you have, then you know the exact feeling that settled over me in that cold, silent house. It was the calm, quiet, terrifying focus of a predator that has finally, after a long hunt, spotted its prey. Mark and Cynthia thought they were the sharks circling in the water. They had absolutely no idea that I was the fucking ocean. The first thing I did was stop crying. It was as if a switch had been flipped in my soul. The grief hadn't vanished. It was still there, a cold, heavy stone lodged deep in my gut, but the rage was a roaring bonfire that warmed me from the inside out. For the first time in a week, I felt something other than pain. I felt a powerful, electrifying sense of purpose. My revenge couldn't be simple or emotional. It couldn't be me keying his car or shredding his expensive suits. That was the reaction he would expect from the naive woman in the bubble. No, they had conspired to ruin a company, a professional ecosystem, and had mocked my life as collateral damage. Their entire plan was built on a foundation of lies, arrogance, and theft. Therefore, my revenge had to be surgical, intellectual, and devastating. It had to dismantle their entire world, brick by brick, just as they had so carelessly dismantled mine. Step 1 was information warfare. The burner phone was my Rosetta Stone of their deceit. I spent the next 48 hours in a caffeine-fueled trance, poring over every single text message, every saved photo, every note. I became a digital archaeologist, excavating the ruins of my marriage. I built a meticulous timeline, cross-referencing their secret hotel stays with Mark's work calendar, which I still had access to on our shared cloud. The leadership conference in Denver was actually a long weekend at a luxury spa in Sedona. The late-night project deadline to win the new account was a 7-course dinner at a private members-only club. I downloaded every file. I took screenshots of every incriminating text. I compiled it all into a single, terrifyingly detailed dossier. It was a symphony of their betrayal, and I was its conductor. Step 2 was finding an ally. I was angry, but I wasn't stupid. I knew I couldn't launch this attack alone. I needed someone on the inside, someone with institutional knowledge and, preferably, a grudge. I racked my brain, trying to remember the names Mark used to complain about from work. There was one that always came up: David Chen. David was a senior data analyst, reportedly brilliant, but perpetually overlooked for promotions that always seemed to go to Mark's hand-picked sycophants. Mark had always described David as bitter and not a team player. I figured bitter was probably just another word for undervalued, and an undervalued, bitter man with access to the company's servers was exactly the kind of team player I needed. I found David on LinkedIn. His profile picture was serious, his resume impressive. I crafted my message with extreme care. Hi, David. My name is Chloe, Mark's wife. I know this is incredibly out of the blue, but I'm working on a highly sensitive project, and a mutual acquaintance mentioned you were one of the most principled and detail-oriented analysts at the firm. I was hoping I might be able to buy you a coffee and ask for some discreet advice regarding a potential data security issue. He was, understandably, cautious, but the bait of a data security issue was too tempting for a man like him to ignore. He agreed to meet. We chose a small, anonymous coffee shop in a neighborhood neither of us frequented. I watched him walk in, a thin, nervous man who looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. I didn't waste time. I laid it all out for him. I didn't show him the affair texts. That pain was mine, and mine alone. I focused on the professional betrayal. I showed him the stolen client lists. I showed him the detailed business plan for their competing startup. I showed him the evidence of corporate espionage, file after file. As he scrolled through the documents on my iPad, I watched his expression shift from cautious curiosity to shock, and then to a slow-burning, righteous fury. The bitterness Mark had described was there, but it wasn't petty. It was the deep, resonant anger of a man who had dedicated years of his life to a company while watching a con artist like Mark charm his way to the top. I knew it, he whispered, his eyes wide. I knew something was fundamentally wrong. They've been bleeding us dry for months. I had my ally. David was all in. He became my inside man, my guide through the complex labyrinth of corporate politics. He helped me understand the power dynamics, who was loyal to whom, and who the real decision-makers were. He told me the CEO, a formidable man named Mr. Harrison, was an old-school titan of industry who valued loyalty and integrity above all else. He also told me that the board of directors was a ruthless collection of sharks who cared about one thing, the stock price, and avoiding any scandal that might threaten it. This information gave me my playbook. I knew exactly who my targets were. While I was meticulously plotting the downfall of their empire, Mark was still engaged in his own desperate campaign to win me back. The tearful voicemails continued. The flower deliveries became a daily occurrence. "Chloe, please, just talk to me. I'll do anything. I'm a mess without you. I'm nothing without you." It was almost darkly comical. He was begging for the affection of the woman he had so casually dismissed as a naive fool. Every pleading message was another gallon of gasoline on my fire. I decided it was time to play his game. I finally answered one of his calls. I pitched my voice low, making it tremble, infusing it with the brokenness I knew he expected to hear. "Mark," I whispered, my voice sounding fragile even to my own ears. "I don't know what to do. I'm so lost without you." I could practically hear the surge of hopeful relief on the other end of the line. "Chloe, baby, we can get through this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise you, I love you more than anything. I quit that job for us, for our future." "I know," I said, letting a fake sob catch in my throat. It was a masterful performance. I need some time to think. It's all so much. Maybe we can talk at the end of the week? In person?" "Anything," he said, his voice desperate. "Anything you want, Chloe. I'll be there." I set the meeting for Friday evening. That gave me and David 3 days to execute our plan. The plan was a two-pronged attack designed for maximum damage. Attack 1 was the professional. Attack 2 was the personal. On Thursday morning, from a secure laptop at a public library, we launched Attack 1. David had helped me compile a devastatingly comprehensive, yet elegantly simple, anonymous email package. It contained the complete dossier of corporate theft, the business plan for their parasitic new company, and irrefutable proof that Cynthia had used her corporate expense account to pay for their illicit hotel stays. We sent it from a newly created, untraceable Proton mail account to 2 recipients simultaneously: Mr. Harrison, the CEO, and the lead independent director of the board. The subject line was a masterclass in understatement. Confidential information regarding Cynthia Miller and Mark. Then, we waited. The silence was deafening. It didn't take long. By lunchtime, my phone buzzed. It was a text from David. "It's happening. Harrison has gone thermonuclear. Emergency board meeting has been called. All hell has officially broken loose." By 3 p.m. that afternoon, an internal memo was blasted out to the entire company. Cynthia Miller had been terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and a fundamental breach of contract. They were careful with the wording. There was no mention of Mark yet, because officially, he had already resigned. They were trying, desperately, to contain the scandal. But I wasn't done. The professional takedown was for the company they had betrayed. The next part was just for me. Cynthia had built her entire public persona on being a woman in power, a trailblazing feminist icon in the male-dominated tech world, a mentor to young women. It was all a carefully constructed brand, and I was about to demolish it. I found the contact information for a well-known, fiercely independent female tech blogger, one who had made a name for herself by exposing hypocrisy in the industry. I sent her a different kind of anonymous package. This one contained a curated selection of the affair texts. Not all of them, just the most personally brutal ones. The ones where they mocked me and my bubble. The ones where Cynthia bragged about sleeping with her subordinates to keep them loyal. And, for the finishing touch, I included a short, sharp note. Cynthia Miller destroyed a marriage and a young woman's life, all while preaching female empowerment. She thinks she's untouchable. Is she? That night, the blog post went live. The headline was explosive. Tech titan Cynthia Miller's secret life of corporate corruption and personal destruction. It spread through the tech world like wildfire. It was on Twitter, on Reddit, on every industry forum. Her meticulously crafted image was shattered into a million pieces in a single evening. And Mark? He had no idea. He was completely in the dark, still clinging to the pathetic hope that he was going to meet me on Friday to talk things through and win back his sweet, naive little wife. Friday came. I agreed to meet him at Our Place, a cozy little Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park, where we had our second date. It felt poetically just. I got there early and chose a table in a dimly lit corner. I wore a crimson-red dress, a dress that wasn't for him, a dress that was a declaration of war. He walked in, and he looked like a ghost. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes bloodshot. He had clearly seen the news about Cynthia, the implosion of his professional world. He looked broken and lost. He rushed to the table, his hands trembling. "Chloe, you won't believe what's happening. The company, they're on a witch hunt. Cynthia, they fired her. They're trying to pin everything on her. It's a nightmare." He was already trying to spin the narrative, to cast himself as a fellow victim. I just sat there, looking at him. I let him talk. I let him spew his lies and his half-truths. Let him dig his own grave deeper and deeper with every pathetic word. He went on and on about corporate backstabbing, about how they were being railroaded. Finally, he paused his frantic monologue, took my hand in his, and looked at me with those sad, manipulative, puppy dog eyes. "But none of that matters, Chloe," he said, his voice thick with counterfeit emotion. "Maybe it's a sign. The universe is burning down our old life so we can start a new one. Just you and me, away from all of this toxicity." I let him hold my hand for a moment longer, then I slowly, deliberately, pulled it away. I took a slow sip of my water, and then I smiled. It wasn't a sad smile or an angry smile. It was a real, genuine, terrifyingly calm smile. "The universe?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "No, Mark, that wasn't the universe. That was me." I watched the color drain from his face. I watched the confusion cloud his eyes, followed by the slow, dawning wave of absolute horror. It was more satisfying than 1,000 screamed insults. What are you talking about?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm talking about the burner phone, Mark," I said, my voice as sharp and clean as a surgeon's scalpel. "The one you so cleverly hid in your nightstand drawer. I'm talking about the texts. All of them. The ones where you called me naive and laughed about my bubble. The ones where you and Cynthia meticulously planned to commit corporate fraud. I'm talking about the anonymous encrypted email to Mr. Harrison and the board of directors. And I'm talking about the very juicy, very anonymous tip-off to that tech blogger." I leaned forward across the table, my smile never wavering. "You thought I was living in a bubble. And you know what? You were right. I was. But you forgot one very important thing about bubbles, Mark. When they burst, they get everything around them wet. You wanted to know if we could fix this. This is me, fixing it." He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air on a dry dock. The powerful, confident man I had married was completely gone. In his place was a hollowed-out shell, a pathetic, defeated little boy who had been caught red-handed. I stood up from the table, my movements fluid and confident. I reached into my purse, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and tossed it onto the table to cover our untouched drinks. I looked down at him one last time, a specimen under my microscope. "By the way," I said, my voice now light and conversational, "my lawyer will be in touch on Monday. Don't worry, Mark. I'm not going to take you for everything, just half of it, and your dignity." "Oh, wait," I paused, tapping my chin in mock thought. "Looks like I already got that." And I turned, and I walked out of that restaurant, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. Walking out of that restaurant, and into the cool night air of Chicago was like taking my first full, deep breath after being held underwater for what felt like a lifetime. The air felt cleaner. The city lights seemed sharper, more vibrant. The rage that had been my fuel for days had burned itself out, replaced by a cold, quiet, profound sense of finality, closure. I got my revenge. It was as total and devastating as I had planned. Mark was a pariah, ruined professionally and personally. Cynthia vanished from the public eye completely, her carefully constructed legacy reduced to a cautionary tale in a viral blog post. Their grand, parasitic plan imploded, and I was the one who had lit the fuse. But here's the secret no one tells you about revenge. It's not a magic potion. It doesn't instantly heal the wounds that necessitated it. Did it feel good? In that moment in the restaurant, watching the comprehension and terror dawn on his face, it was the most powerfully validating feeling I have ever experienced. It was the feeling of taking back control. But when I got back to Mia's quiet apartment later that night, the silence was still there. The emptiness was still a hollowed-out space in the center of my chest. I had destroyed my destroyers, but my old life was still a pile of rubble. My heart was still broken. Revenge is a bonfire. It keeps you warm and gives you light for a night, but in the morning, you wake up to a cold pile of ashes, and you are still alone. It's been 6 months now. The divorce is final. The legal proceedings were messy, but my dossier made my case unassailable. I moved out of the suburbs and into this apartment in the city. It's smaller, but it's all mine. I've thrown myself into my work, and I'm better at it than ever. I've reconnected with old friends. I'm rediscovering the woman I was before I became Mark's wife. Some days are good. Some days are great. I feel strong. I feel independent. I feel like the woman who wore that red dress and walked out of that restaurant with her head held high. I'll be walking by the river, the sun on my face, and feel a moment of pure, unadulterated peace, and I'll know that I'm going to be okay. Other days are hard. A song will come on the radio, one we used to love, or I'll see a tall man with blonde hair from behind, and for a split second, my heart will forget to be broken and leap with a phantom joy. And then the memory hits, and the grief is as fresh as it was that first night. The stone in my gut is still there. It's smaller now, its sharp edges worn smooth by time, but it's there. A permanent reminder of the life I lost, and the person I had to become in order to survive its loss. I don't know if I regret it. The revenge. I think about that a lot. When you are pushed into a corner, when your trust is so completely violated, when you are utterly shattered, you do what you have to do to feel whole again. My way was to burn their world down to feel like I could stand up again. Maybe that makes me a bad person, or maybe it just makes me human. So I have to ask you, what would you have done? If you discovered your entire life, your love, your home, was all a lie, would you crumble? Or would you become the architect of a new reality, even if it meant you had to build it on top of the ashes of the old one? I don't have any easy answers. All I know is that I'm still here. I'm still standing. The bubble is gone forever, and the real world is harsh and cold sometimes, but it's real. And for the first time in a very long time, I am the one in control of my own story. And this time, I'm the only one writing the script.